When I ask you to think about what happens to a creature when it grows up, what do you think about? Most people would imagine an animal that grows from a smaller version of itself into a larger version of itself. Take me, for instance. Here's a picture of me when I was only 6 years old. And here's a picture of me now. There are some changes to the way I look. For instance, I have a lot less hair on the top of my head and a lot more on my face. But I still ultimately am the same person. My physical features haven't changed to a point where you don't recognize me as still being a human. Now, what if I were to tell you that that doesn't happen with all creatures as they grow up? Some creatures, like frogs, start their lives as a tadpole and then go through a metamorphosis into a frog. To metamorphosis means to change your form into a completely new form. I'm going to show you this today by talking about the life cycle of a frog. The first stage of life for a frog starts out as an egg. This is a picture of a female frog laying her eggs. You'll notice the smaller frog on her back. That is the male frog. He's there to fertilize the eggs. If he does not fertilize them, they will never hatch and grow up to be adult frogs. Here is a close-up picture of what the frog eggs look like. They stay in this stage for about 3 days. On the third to fourth day, the tadpole begins to form a tiny tail. The tadpole is what a baby frog is called. This stage is called the tail bud stage and usually lasts up to the 6th day. On the 6th day, the tadpoles hatch. They're very tiny and have formed external lungs so that they may breathe underwater. They also have a small tail that helps them to swim and get around. After another 3 days have passed, skin begins to grow over the tadpole's external gills as they become internal gills. The tail also of the tadpole lengthens and becomes fatter so that they may travel greater distances for food. This is very important as they go into their next stage of life. This next stage in the tadpole's life lasts the longest, as it goes between 12 and 80 days. In this stage, the tadpole begins to fatten up. Their eyes become larger and more developed, and their tails become stronger. Also, at the end of this stage, the tadpole begins to grow tiny back legs. Those tiny legs that they sprout grow very quickly. In about 5 days, the back legs become stronger, and the tadpole now begins to use its legs more frequently to swim and get around than it does its tail. Also in this stage, the tadpole begins to develop lungs that they use to begin to breathe air. In the next stage, the tadpole grows tiny front legs, and its tail becomes thinner and shorter. It begins to use its legs more now to get around than it does its tail. This is when the tadpole begins to leave the water for the land, as its lungs have become more powerful. In this stage, the tadpole, or as it is more commonly referred to, the baby frog, is spending most of its time out of the water. Its lungs have become more powerful, and it's able to exclusively breathe air. The eyes have also fully developed and grown, and are now on top of the frog's head. Can you believe that from the point the tadpole grew its front legs and then got to this point, only took a week to happen? What's even more shocking to think is that it only takes about 3 months for a tadpole to metamorphosize into a baby frog. Think about all of that change that happens. What the tadpole goes through to become a frog. Amazing. The process can change from time to time, depending on the species of frog. For instance, this species of frog carries its tadpoles on its back. Also, if the heat of the water is warmer, the process is faster. Now I said life cycle of the frog, so prepare yourself. This part gets a little bit sad. What happens to the frog after it gets old and dies? Well, after a period of time, the body begins to decompose. Creatures called decomposers, like worms and bugs, they begin to clean up the mess. They help to change the frog's body into soil that has many nutrients that plants can use to grow big and strong. Plants use these nutrients to help themselves grow bigger and stronger, and bugs feed off these nutrients in order to become bigger and stronger too. And what's a creature that we all know that enjoys to eat bugs? That's right, the frog. I really hope that you enjoyed learning about the frog's life cycle and how it metamorphosizes from a tadpole into a baby frog.